The day you stop needing someone to complete you is the day you start attracting everything that was meant for you, not because you're desperate, but because you're whole. Dependence is expensive, freedom is wealthy. Not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And until you realize that, you'll keep trading your peace for company, your clarity for chaos, and your power for permission. Most people think dependence only applies to money. But the truth is, dependence shows up in how you love, how you think, how you move, and how you let people treat you. When you need someone to validate your worth, you're not in a relationship, you're in a transaction. And transactions are always expensive. When your confidence depends on who texts you back, you're in debt. When your peace depends on someone else's approval, you're in debt. And when your self-worth fluctuates based on how someone sees you, you're not in control of your life. They are. You have to wake up and realize what it's costing you. Every time you silence your voice to keep the peace, you're paying for dependence. Every time you shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone, you're overpaying with your purpose. And the saddest part is, most people don't even know they're doing it. They call it love, but it's fear. They call it loyalty, but it's survival. They call it compromise, but it's submission to someone else's dysfunction. That's the cost of dependence. You weren't designed to be needy. You were created to be whole. You were made in the image of a creator who lacks nothing, and yet you live like you need someone to complete you. No, that's not purpose. That's programming. That's what the world taught you so you'd stay easy to control, easy to manipulate, easy to pacify. But the moment you decide, I will no longer pay for peace with myself, worth, everything shifts. The moment you say, I'm not negotiating my joy, you begin to generate wealth, not just in your bank account, but in your soul. Emotional freedom is a form of wealth. The ability to walk away from what disrespects you is wealth. The discipline to sit with yourself and heal is wealth. The clarity to know what aligns with your spirit and what disturbs your peace, that's wealth. Because when you're wealthy internally, no external situation can bankrupt your spirit. Dependence always comes with a hidden tax. The more you depend on someone else for your identity, the more you lose sight of who you are. That's why some people look confused when they're alone. They don't know what to do with themselves when there's no one to mirror their value back to them. But that's exactly where the transformation begins. Solitude exposes your strength. It confronts your insecurity. It shows you the places where you've outsourced your identity, your joy, your confidence. And if you're wise, you'll let it teach you. You'll stop blaming others for what you handed over willingly. You'll stop expecting someone else to rescue you from a life you keep choosing. Freedom costs, too. But the price of freedom is discipline, responsibility, and growth, not your soul. Dependence may feel easier in the moment, but it always collects interest. It always asks for more of you than it returns. It will drain you dry and still demand more, because anything you depend on to feel whole has the power to control you. So here's the truth. You can't be free and still need permission to be who you are. You can't be free and still fear walking alone. You can't be free and still be addicted to applause, attention, or acceptance. True freedom is internal. It's when you know who you are even when no one's watching. It's when your worth isn't on the table every time someone disapproves. It's when your spirit is unshakable because your source is unchanging. That kind of freedom is rare, but it's available to anyone willing to stop renting their value from other people and start owning it from within. You don't need someone to tell you you're valuable. You don't need a relationship to feel worthy. You don't need a platform to know your voice matters. You were already enough before they noticed you. You were already powerful before they confirmed you. The wealthiest people on this planet aren't just those with millions in the bank. They're the ones who can sit in a room by themselves and not feel empty. They're the ones who can lose people and not lose themselves. They're the ones who have learned to love their own company so deeply that anything less than peace feels like theft. Dependence is expensive, but most people don't calculate the cost until they're empty. But when you choose freedom, when you decide that your soul is too valuable to sell for comfort, you step into a level of power that can't be shaken. Because now, you're not surviving, you're leading. You're not begging, you're creating, you're not waiting, you're building, and in that space you realize freedom was never about isolation. It was about independence. It was about owning your power, mastering your mind, and refusing to let the world dictate your worth. You grow strong when you stop asking for permission to be who you are and start living from a place of divine conviction. And that kind of strength, that's the foundation of true wealth. Solitude isn't a punishment, it's preparation. But most people miss it because they confuse stillness with stagnation and silence with rejection. They think being alone means they've failed, been forgotten, or somehow fallen behind. But in truth, solitude is where God hides his best work. It's the training ground for transformation, the workshop for purpose, and the classroom where identity is restored. See, the world teaches you to panic when things get quiet. We're addicted to noise, to movement, to validation, to company, even if it's the wrong kind. But in the kingdom, the opposite is true. God does his most strategic work in silence, not when you're surrounded by applause, but when you're isolated enough to hear him clearly. Some of the most powerful people in history were prepared in solitude. David didn't get anointed in a palace. He was tending sheep in the fields, forgotten by his family. But that field wasn't punishment. It was preparation. That was where he learned to fight lions and bears before he ever faced Goliath. The solitude wasn't failure. It was formation, and that same principle applies to you. The season you're in right now, where it feels like no one sees you, no one calls, no one checks in, don't despise that. Don't mislabel what God is using to develop you. He's not punishing you. He's protecting your process. He's pulling you away from distractions to sharpen your discernment. He's cutting off noise so you can hear strategy. And he's removing counterfeit connections so he can prepare you for real covenant. You don't build power in the crowd. You build it in the quiet. You don't find your voice by shouting over others. You find it in the stillness of your own soul. And you don't discover who you are by being surrounded 24/7. You find it when it's just you, your thoughts, and your God. Solitude is sacred. It reveals what the crowd conceals. It confronts the parts of you that performance has hidden. It calls out the truth you've buried under people, pleasing and applause, chasing, and if you can endure it, if you can stay long enough to be honest with yourself, you will find a version of you that doesn't flinch at silence, that doesn't chase attention, and that doesn't break when people leave. Because that's what solitude does. It strips you down to your essence. It reveals whether your confidence is rooted in presence or performance. It shows whether your faith is built on what you feel or what you know. And it tests whether your identity is tied to being seen or being sent. Sometimes God will isolate you so that when he sends you, you're not dependent on the people around you to feel qualified. Because here's the truth. If you don't learn how to stand strong alone, you'll collapse under pressure when you're elevated. If you don't learn to hear God in silence, you'll mistake every loud voice for his. And if you don't know who you are without applause, you'll start performing just to keep it. Solitude isn't about loneliness. It's about leadership. It's where you wrestle with the deeper questions. Who am I when no one's watching? What do I believe when there's no encouragement? Do I trust the process even when it doesn't make sense? Those questions won't get answered in a crowd. They get answered in the wilderness, in the dark, in the quiet, and yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's painful, but it's also necessary, because purpose doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in consecration. Think about it. The caterpillar doesn't become the butterfly in public view. It's hidden in the cocoon, isolated, undisturbed. That cocoon may look like confinement, but it's actually construction. Wings are being built, identity is being transformed, and when it emerges, it doesn't need to explain what it went through. It just flies. That's what solitude is doing for you. It's building your wings. It's increasing your capacity. It's separating you from what's familiar so you can grow into what's destined. And when the time comes to step out, you won't need to prove anything. Your transformation will speak for itself. But you've got to endure the solitude. Don't run from it. Don't try to rush it. Don't try to fill it with empty noise or temporary people. Learn to sit in it. Learn to listen in it. Learn to grow in it. Because if you avoid the preparation, you forfeit the elevation. You don't become strong by surrounding yourself with comfort. You become strong by standing in the fire and choosing to believe in your value when no one is clapping for you. That's when identity takes root. That's when vision becomes unshakable. That's when your spirit becomes so grounded that nothing external can move it. So no, solitude is not punishment. It's the sharpening of your sword. It's the deepening of your well. It's the space where God doesn't just give you instructions. He gives you identity. And when you emerge from that place, you'll move with a quiet confidence, a grounded authority, and an unshakable peace. You won't need the crowd. You'll know you were prepared for more, not in front of people, but in the presence of purpose. Wholeness attracts. Brokenness chases. That's a truth most people learn the hard way. Because when you're not whole, you don't attract love. You attract lessons. You don't attract peace. You attract patterns. And until you recognize the difference, you'll keep calling cycles connections and calling dysfunction destiny. When you are broken, you chase people hoping they'll patch your wounds. You pursue relationships, friendships, attention, and approval, not out of fullness, but out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being unseen, fear of being unworthy. But anything you chase out of fear will control you. You'll end up with attachments you call love, but they're really survival mechanisms. You'll confuse chemistry with clarity and attention with affection. But here's the real issue. Brokenness is loud, it's needy, it's restless. It's always trying to prove, impress, and perform. It says, if I do enough, they'll choose me. If I'm good enough, they won't leave. If I keep giving, maybe they'll see me. But wholeness doesn't beg to be seen. It walks in the room already knowing it's enough. It doesn't chase, it chooses. It doesn't panic, it positions. When you're whole, your presence speaks louder than your words. People can feel when you've done the work. You carry peace like armor. You move with grace, not urgency. You don't force, because you're not desperate. You understand that what belongs to you will never have to be manipulated to stay. You don't need to cling, because you've already claimed yourself. See, brokenness creates codependency. You think someone else holds the key to your healing, so you chase them. You mold yourself to their preferences. You compromise your standards just to be chosen. And every time you do that, you chip away at your soul. You lose bits of yourself for someone who was never meant to hold what you were carrying. But when you're whole, you're not looking for someone to fill you. You're looking for someone who matches your overflow. You've already filled your cup. You've already sat in the silence. You've already faced your demons, healed your wounds, and learned how to validate yourself. You don't need anyone to fix you. You've already met the healer within. You want to know why brokenness chases? Because it's hungry, it's searching for a shortcut, but you can't skip the process. You can't shortcut self-worth. You can't bypass healing and expect to arrive at purpose. Healing hurts. Growth stretches. But wholeness, it's built in the quiet spaces, in the lonely nights, in the moments where you finally look in the mirror and stop asking others to tell you who you are. You attract what you believe you deserve, and if you believe you're not enough, you'll attract people who confirm that belief. You'll chase after those who mirror your wounds instead of honoring your worth. And even when they mistreat you, you'll make excuses. Because in your broken state, mistreatment feels familiar. Dysfunction feels like home. That's why you have to become whole before you expect to experience peace in partnership. Wholeness isn't perfection. It's alignment. It's when your mind, heart, and spirit are working together instead of against each other. It's when you know how to love yourself without condition. It's when your value doesn't rise or fall based on who stayed or who left. It's when your joy isn't held hostage by someone's presence or absence. You stop chasing when you finally understand who you are. Because once you're rooted in your identity, you won't move just to be accepted. You won't shrink just to be tolerated. You won't chase anyone who doesn't see the divine weight you carry. Why? Because you know you are a temple, not a convenience store. Access to you has to be earned, not demanded. Brokenness says, please choose me. Wholeness says, I've already chosen myself. Brokenness fears being alone. Wholeness embraces solitude as a sacred space. Brokenness rushes into connection. Wholeness moves with wisdom and discernment. You attract what you are prepared for. And if you're not prepared to hold peace, you'll sabotage it. If you're not prepared to receive love, you'll reject it. If you're not prepared for stability, you'll label it boring and run back to chaos. So what do? You become the person you've been looking for. You become the safe space you keep seeking in others. You build the emotional wealth that no one can take from you. You stop outsourcing your happiness and start cultivating it within. Because once you become whole, your energy changes. You no longer chase what's misaligned. You no longer tolerate what drains you. You no longer negotiate your worth for a seat at a table that dishonors your presence. You become magnetic, not because you're loud, but because you're authentic, not because you're perfect, but because you're healed. That's the power of wholeness. It changes your posture. It changes your pace. And most of all, it changes what you allow. When you're whole, you don't need to chase, because everything meant for you starts finding you, because you're finally in position to receive it. The person you become alone determines what you attract together. That's the truth that separates people who keep repeating cycles from those who rise and attract alignment. Most people want to find the right person, but few are focused on becoming the right person first. They want love, connection, commitment, but they ignore the internal work required to sustain it. They think partnership is the solution to loneliness, but partnership without identity leads to codependency. And codependency always destroys what purpose is meant to build. If you're lost within yourself, you'll keep looking for someone to find you. If you haven't healed, you'll attract people who poke your wounds instead of protect your soul. If you haven't cultivated clarity, you'll keep calling confusion chemistry. Because here's what's real. Your internal state will always be mirrored by what you allow into your life. It's not just about who you're with, it's about who you are when no one else is around. That's the version of you that sets the tone. That's the version of you that either commands respect or settles for crumbs. That's the version of you that either walks with purpose or crawls through patterns. When you're alone, your real identity is revealed, not the version of you that performs, not the version of you that adjusts to be accepted, but the unfiltered, unmasked version, the one who hears your thoughts, wrestles with doubt, carries old pain, and dreams about more. And until that version of you is rooted, secure, and submitted to purpose, you will keep attracting people who feel familiar but are not fruitful. Familiar isn't the same as aligned. Some people feel familiar because they match your trauma, not your transformation. They feel right because they awaken something in your dysfunction, not your destiny. And if you haven't done the work alone, you won't be able to tell the difference. You'll confuse emotional intensity with spiritual intimacy. You'll call patterns purpose. You'll label red flags as passion. But when you've done the work, when you've sat in solitude and faced yourself without distraction, you become dangerous to the enemy of your future. You stop tolerating what feels good and start choosing what aligns with God's blueprint for your life. You no longer need someone to rescue you. You've already partnered with healing. You're not waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. That internal shift changes everything. You start attracting from confidence, not craving. You start discerning instead of chasing. You're not driven by fear of being alone because you've already found peace in your own presence. You're not in a hurry to find someone to complete you. You're preparing to meet someone who complements what you've already cultivated. Some people ask, why do I keep attracting the same type of person? The answer is simple, because you keep being the same version of yourself. Until you evolve, your circle won't. Until you heal, your patterns won't break. Until you grow, what shows up in your life won't change. This is why isolation isn't punishment, it's positioning. It's where you unlearn what broke you. It's where you detox from people who distorted your self-image. It's where you get clear on who you are and what you carry. That clarity doesn't come when you're busy performing. It comes when you're still enough to hear your soul speak. You need that stillness before you connect, because connection without clarity creates confusion. If you don't know what you value, you'll compromise it. If you don't know your worth, you'll accept anything. If you haven't learned how to lead yourself in solitude, you'll follow anyone in relationship. The person you are alone is the foundation for everything you'll build together. If you're needy alone, you'll be possessive together. If you're insecure alone, you'll be jealous together. If you're unclear alone, you'll be chaotic together. But if you're grounded alone, you'll be peaceful together. If you're purpose-driven alone, you'll attract vision together. If you're healed alone, you'll be whole together. You can't skip this step. You can't fast forward through identity formation. The work you do when no one is watching determines what shows up when everyone is. You're not waiting on someone to fix your life. You're being equipped to partner with someone without losing yourself in the process. Because here's the thing, the right person is not going to complete your brokenness. They're going to recognize your wholeness. The right person is not going to fix your chaos. They're going to harmonize with your peace. But if you haven't created peace within, you'll reject what's healthy and gravitate toward what feels familiar, even if it's destructive. You don't rise to the level of your wishes. You rise to the level of your work. And the real work is done in the dark. The real work is internal. The real work is becoming the kind of person you would actually want to be with. The kind of person who doesn't chase validation, who knows their value, who protects their energy, who leads with faith, not fear. So many are looking for their person. But the real breakthrough is becoming the person who doesn't need saving, fixing, or constant reassurance. The person who can love deeply without losing themselves, who can give without begging, who can walk away from what doesn't align, not out of ego, but out of self-respect. Because when you become that version of you, you don't just attract someone, you attract alignment. You don't just enter a relationship, you build legacy, not based on need but on overflow, not rooted in fear but in faith, and not shaped by brokenness, but born out of wholeness. Silence reveals what noise conceals. Most people don't realize how loud the world is until they're finally quiet, and when that quiet shows up, when the notifications stop, when the crowd disappears, when the relationship ends, when the distraction is removed, you're left with the one thing you've been avoiding all along, yourself. See, noise is comfortable. It fills the space. It keeps your mind busy. It drowns out the internal questions, the doubts, the disappointments, the childhood wounds, the unspoken fears, the unrealized dreams. Noise tells you you're okay because you're moving. But movement without meaning is just motion, and motion without purpose is just a distraction. The reason some people never heal is because they never sit still long enough to hear what their soul is trying to say. They bounce from one person to another, one goal to the next, one conversation to the next, never stopping, never pausing, because in the silence the truth gets loud. And when the truth gets loud, illusions start breaking. Noise makes you believe everything is fine. It convinces you that because you're busy, you must be productive. Because you're surrounded, you must be loved. Because you're connected, you must be supported. But silence doesn't lie. Silence strips away performance. It exposes what's beneath the surface. It makes you face what you've been avoiding. That's why silence is powerful. It's not weakness. It's not emptiness. It's not punishment. Silence is surgery. It cuts through the noise and goes straight to the root. It exposes what you've been covering, and yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's also necessary, because you can't fix what you won't face, and you won't face it until the noise is gone. Some of the greatest breakthroughs don't come in crowds, they come in isolation. Some of the deepest clarity doesn't come during conversation, it comes during quiet. And some of the most divine instructions don't come through applause, they come through stillness. God doesn't shout over your distractions. He whispers in the silence. But if you're always surrounded by noise, you'll miss his voice every time. You want to know why certain people can't find peace. It's not because peace doesn't exist, it's because they've never learned how to sit in silence. Their nervous system is addicted to noise. Their ego is addicted to validation. Their mind is addicted to motion. And their spirit is starving for rest. Not rest in a bed, rest in identity, rest in truth, rest in alignment. You'll never know who you are if you keep drowning yourself in distractions. You'll never understand your patterns if you never pause to reflect. You'll never break generational cycles if you're too busy repeating them. Silence is the space where transformation begins. Not because it feels good, but because it forces you to confront the parts of you that noise helped you ignore. Sometimes silence feels like loss, but it's really liberation. When the calls stop, when the messages don't come, when the rooms get quiet, that's when your vision gets clearer. That's when you stop being defined by the opinions of others. That's when you stop being shaped by approval and start being led by purpose. And here's the truth. The longer you run from silence, the longer you delay your healing. The longer you numb yourself with busyness, the longer you stay disconnected from who you were created to be, because you weren't made to live in chaos. You weren't made to live off of noise. You were made to carry peace. But peace has to be built within before it ever shows up around you. Silence will show you what's really driving you. It will reveal the real reasons behind your choices. You'll see where your insecurities lie. You'll notice where your trauma still speaks. You'll recognize how many of your dreams were born out of pain instead of purpose. And once you see it, you can heal it. But most people aren't ready for that level of honesty. They'd rather stay busy, stay distracted, stay surrounded. But that kind of life is shallow. It's unstable. It's temporary because it's not rooted in truth. It's built on what looks good, not what's good. And at some point, it all crumbles. If you want to build a life that lasts, a life with depth, purpose, and peace, it starts in silence. That's where the foundation is laid. That's where the noise fades and the voice of truth rises. That's where your soul finally exhales. And that's where you stop performing and start becoming. The strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who learned how to master silence, who found their strength in stillness, who discovered their identity in solitude. They don't need a crowd to feel valid. They don't need attention to feel worthy, because they've already done the work in private that shows up in public. You don't need more noise. You need more truth, and truth isn't found in constant talking, scrolling, proving, or pushing. It's found in quiet reflection, in the sacred pause, in the moments where the world goes silent and you're left with just you and God. That's when things shift. That's when healing happens. That's when clarity arrives. And that's when your life starts moving in alignment with your assignment. Not because you added more, but because you finally got quiet enough to hear what was always there. You don't find peace in others until you make peace within. That's why people jump from person to person, place to place, experience to experience, chasing something that was never outside of them to begin with. Peace is not found in presence. Peace is found in alignment. And until your inner world is whole, nothing external will satisfy you for long. You can surround yourself with love and still feel unloved. You can have a room full of people and still feel lonely. You can achieve every goal and still feel anxious. Why? Because peace isn't a product of success, attention, or even relationships. It's a result of internal healing. Until you deal with the war inside, no one else can calm your storm. We were never meant to depend on others for what we were designed to cultivate ourselves. But the world has convinced people that love will fix what discipline never addressed. That companionship will cover what trauma never healed. That affection will cure what accountability avoids. So what happens? We become emotional beggars, starving for affirmation, addicted to attention, and mistaking comfort for connection. But peace is not something you receive. Peace is something you build, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. You choose it when you stop reacting to every opinion. You build it when you stop chasing people who drain you. You guard it when you no longer sacrifice your boundaries just to feel wanted. Peace is not passive. It's built through intentional action. If you're not okay with yourself, you'll never be okay with anyone else. You'll bleed on people who didn't cut you. You'll project fears onto people who came to love you. You'll sabotage good things because your inner dialogue still tells you you're not enough. That's why peace has to start inside. That's why healing is not optional if you want real connection. Too many people are trying to find peace in a person when what they really need is solitude, time to sit, to reflect, to detox from false identity. To heal the root, not just manage the symptom. Because if you don't know who you are, you'll keep molding yourself to be what others want. And every time you shift for acceptance, you lose a piece of your soul. Inner peace doesn't come from being loved. It comes from knowing you are already worthy of love, with or without someone else to confirm it. It comes from knowing You can walk away from chaos and still be whole. It comes from knowing that your value doesn't depend on how someone sees you. It's rooted in how you see yourself. You don't find peace by fixing others. You find it by facing yourself, by being honest about what still hurts, by forgiving where necessary, by letting go of the stories you've told yourself about who you are and what you deserve. Peace is the fruit of self-awareness, the result of taking responsibility for your healing, your habits, and your heart. Some people stay in toxic situations not because they don't want peace, but because peace feels unfamiliar. They've lived in dysfunction so long that quiet feels threatening, calm feels boring, stability feels foreign. That's what unhealed trauma does. It makes chaos feel like home. But you can't find peace while romanticizing your pain. You can't find peace while protecting your triggers. You can't find peace while blaming everyone else for what you refuse to heal. You have to stop outsourcing what was always an inside job. Stop expecting your partner to fix your insecurities. Stop expecting your friends to carry your emotional weight. Stop expecting success to silence the inner critic. That's not their job. That's your job. That's what growth demands. That's what healing produces. That's what maturity looks like. When you make peace within, you stop looking for people to rescue you. You stop assigning others the role of healer. You stop walking into rooms needing attention to feel seen, because you've already seen yourself. You've already approved yourself. You've already comforted the version of you that was once broken. And when you walk in that kind of wholeness, everything changes. You no longer settle for conversations that drain your spirit. You no longer beg for the bare minimum. You no longer attach your worth to whether someone stays or leaves. Because you are no longer depending on others to do what only you and God can do within. Peace isn't just a vibe. It's a posture. It's how you show up, how you think, how you speak. It's the tone of your soul when no one else is around. It's the stability that remains even when circumstances shift. It's the quiet confidence that doesn't rise and fall with someone's presence or absence. And here's the truth. When you finally make peace within, you attract peace around you. You'll see how the chaos falls away, how the noise quiets, how the wrong people lose interest. Why? Because you're no longer feeding dysfunction. You're no longer a match for instability. You're no longer entertained by what once distracted you. Peace has a frequency, and once you start operating on it, everything not aligned with it starts falling off. Not because you fought it, but because you outgrew it. And that's what this is all about. Not becoming more lovable to others, but becoming more aligned with who you truly are. The peace you're looking for isn't out there. It's been waiting inside of you, underneath the noise, beneath the layers, behind the masks. And the moment you choose to stop running and start listening, that's the moment you start living in it. Don't be afraid to grow so strong that peace becomes your only priority. Because once you learn how to be happy alone, you'll never again settle for someone who brings confusion to your clarity. Your strength, your joy, your destiny, they're not in someone else's hands. They've been within you the whole time.